Dear Mr President, pursuant to Standing Order 75, I propose that the following matter of public importance be submitted to the Senate for discussion: the crisis of housing affordability in Australia and the unwillingness of the Abbott government to consider negative gearing and capital gains tax exemptions in its tax review. Is the proposal supported? Indeed it is. Now, I understand that informal arrangements have been made to allow specific speaking times to contributors in today's debate, and with the concurrence of the Senate, I shall ask the clerks to set the clock accordingly, and I call Senator Ludlam.
Thank you very much, Mr President. It's really timely that the Australian Senate should be debating housing affordability, because it's a debate that has, I think, been submerged. It's been somewhat subliminal that major party political spokespeople, particularly the Coalition, spend a lot of time talking about the cost of living and almost no time talking about the cost of housing. A couple of weeks ago, we introduced an initiative to phase out negative gearing, that it would be grandfathered for those who already negatively gear their properties, but it would henceforth be unavailable. And over a period of 10 years or so, negative gearing is effectively wound back and taken out of our tax system. It is one of the largest tax expenditures on the books in Australia over a 10-year period. When you get the impact of negative gearing having been almost completely unwound from the Australian tax system, the Parliamentary Budget Office estimated it would be worth roughly $42 billion. $42 billion. To a government that has been cutting taxes and slashing revenue since it arrived, I would have thought that would be something that Coalition MPs would be very keen, not necessarily to adopt. I understand that's not how politics works, but at least to talk through the merits, at least to have the argument, and at least to challenge it on the facts. And we are seeing no such behaviour from the Australian government. I want to acknowledge the Australian Labor Party. It was very difficult to get the Labor Party to move or even discuss this subject when they were in government, and that wasn't for lack of trying. However, I think they can be commended at least for being willing to entertain the debate. Mr Bowen has been out canvassing a number of different options. We understand that there's a bunch of policy work and a discussion paper going on behind the scenes. At least you're willing, the Labor Party and some of the crossbenchers, to engage in the debate, and that's all we're asking for. Why on earth would you not include negative gearing and the way that capital gains are concessionally taxed in your tax review? It was meant to be open to all comers. Put everything on the table. Let's have a look at the entirety of the Australian tax system and see if we can have a more intelligent and mature debate than the one that ensued after the Henry tax review. No such luck. Because while that invitation was made, since then the Treasurer and the Prime Minister have been busy ruling things out as too scary to even talk about, not even wanting to look at the evidence. And what it comes down to, and the arguments that have been put forward serially by senior government spokespeople from the Prime Minister on down, Finance Minister Cormann was at it again yesterday, is that if you abolish negative gearing, you push up rents. He even sought to give us a condescending little lecture in the realities of market economics. How wonderful that if you abolish negative gearing, you will push up rents by somehow restricting supply. Absolutely unbelievable. If we could come out of this debate with anything at all, the one thing that I would implore is that we can set this appalling, unsubstantiated myth aside once for all and just engage the debate on the facts, rather than having people as senior as the Treasurer and the Prime Minister just making stuff up on the fly, unsubstantiated and unsupportable. And don't come in here and tell us that you have suddenly discovered the plight of renters. A third of the households in this country rent. About a third are owner-occupiers, about a third are property investors. And the table has been tilted by these extraordinary tax concessions that are paid out to property investors, and the largest amount of those benefits accrue to those with the most wealth. Wealth inequality in this country is staggering and it's growing, and this is one of the key levers that has been deployed invisibly and subliminally. And when we talk about winding it back or removing it, or at least opening up a conversation about levelling the playing field, we're told, no, let the market sort it out, when the market is subject to this gargantuan distortion. A cabinet submission of 1987 on negative gearing from the Coalition belied this complete untruth, this myth that negative gearing keeps rents low. It has manifestly failed to keep rents low, and it has failed as a supply initiative. It has failed on the two criteria on which you would concessionally grant these massive expenditures to property investors. It has failed, and it's time that we dealt with it. ABC Fact Check this April comprehensively and quite forensically demolished the arguments that rents would be pushed up if negative gearing went. Successive reports by the Grattan Institute, by ACOS, recently by the Australia Institute, a macro business article yesterday quite elegantly demolished this notion. Negative gearing does nothing to boost housing supply because it's all going into existing established properties. 95% is going into existing properties. It has failed as a supply initiative. And if investors sold their properties in revolt, guess who they would be selling those properties to? Renters. And that frees up one rental dwelling, and the net balance is zero. It will not have an impact on forcing rents up. If anything, it would be precisely the opposite. And the rental data from the time period 85 to 87, which is wheeled out, is the last time they tried this. The earth almost spiralled into the sun when you tried to lift negative gearing. The data and the facts from that period 85 to 87 totally demolish that myth. Rents were going up in Sydney and Perth because rental vacancies were less than 1.5%. They stayed flat or declined in Canberra, Melbourne, Brisbane and Adelaide. The myth that negative gearing pushed rents up is a lie. And all I ask, senators, in this debate, if you could maybe talk to your spokespeople about the talking points that they get across, is just not to put fabrications in there. At least can we have this debate on the merits. Abolishing negative gearing will not push rents up. It will level the playing field in favour of first home buyers and renters. And ultimately, that helps the people hardest hit by the housing affordability crisis in Australia, and that means homeless people. Skyrocketing and unaffordable rents push people into homelessness, and homelessness can kill you. It kills people. Not just in cities that get below freezing in winter, but right across this country. Homelessness can be terminal for people suffering from a myriad of other life difficulties. Homelessness can kill, and it's time that we dealt with it. Senator Waters put it in very stark terms in an article that she put up on Daily Life only a couple of days ago, reminding us that domestic violence is the single biggest cause of homelessness in Australia. Domestic violence is the #1 cause. That is women, sometimes with their kids, fleeing violent and unsafe households and finding themselves with nowhere to go. And so that is why we are proposing, with the $3 billion that this initiative would put back into consolidated revenue in the first 3 years, not even the entire 10-year period, $3 billion over the forward estimates, that we propose to plough into homelessness, and you could basically, by 2020, with the money we have estimated, house every rough sleeper in the country. It's at least 7,500 people, at the same time as cutting 7,000 people, or 7,000 families, I should say, from the social housing waiting list, where people in acute emergency circumstances can be told that they will be on that emergency waiting list for more than a year. For more than a year. And that is the kind of supply-side initiative that we need. Not this failed injection of cash into property investors, but an actual investment into supply, into new supply. So I desperately hope that we won't hear that we're against supply and all we need is more supply and all we need is more land release. This situation is extremely complex, but at least get the elephant in the room out in the open. The recent Senate inquiry into domestic violence showed that housing unaffordability is causing bottlenecks in domestic violence refuges across Australia. And Senator Waters writes, women are being turned away because there is no affordable, safe, long-term housing for those already living at refuges to move on to. And effectively what we confirmed in a budget estimates hearing, the one before last, is that it's 438 women a day are being turned away. They are coming to shelters and to crisis accommodation and being told there is nowhere for them to go. That is what housing affordability crisis means. Not that it's in the real estate pages about how much capital accumulation and investment properties and how great it is that Tony Abbott's property in Sydney has appreciated in value. Good on him. But homelessness kills people, and it's time that we unkinked these extraordinary tax expenditures and levelled the playing field for first home buyers and for the homeless in this country.
Thank you, Senator Ludlam. Senator